Anubha Bhonsle, welcome to News Laundry. Anubha is, just for our viewers, is currently the executive editor of CNN IBN. You have been reported extensively on politics, gender, human rights, and the impact of long conflict. You won a couple of awards. I won't go through all of them. And your work was recommended at the New York Film Festival, which is the work that you did on Sharmila.
Yes.
Right. Now, this book, Mother, Where's My Country? I suggest that anyone who wants to educate themselves about India should read this book. Because the one thing that struck me while I was reading was that how much we don't know, and how much is not covered, and how guilty the Indian media is of ignoring this area completely. You start with a description of the area,
Yes.
which by itself to me was a shock. You say, you write, with 350 communities and a combined population of about 40 million, the 8 northeastern states, Assam, Manipur, Nagaland, Tripura, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim share more than 98% of their borders with China, Bangladesh, Bhutan and Myanmar. The only land connection with the rest of India is a slender corridor, the Chicken's Neck, also a cartographic relic of the British. Now, given our issues with the Chinese, just this paragraph should be frightening enough for any Indian government to make sure that we are at peace in these areas, but it hasn't happened.
True.
When you describe in detail about what happened historically, what happened with the Congress Party, with Jawaharlal Nehru, and even with Jayaprakash Narayan in 1965, when you've written that such was the mood that Jayaprakash Narayan's suggestion in 1965, that it is far more important to have friendly Nagas at our frontier closely associated with us in some new constitutional manner, rather than unfriendly and discontented Nagas kept forcibly with the Indian Union, was taken as seditious, and many members of parliament demanded his arrest.
That's true.
Now, when I went through what you have written and the historical context, it really, if you've studied Kashmir also, there are many similarities.
Absolutely.
When you were writing the book, did it strike you as you were going along that historically the same problem during when we got our independence, and how Kashmir was treated and how this area was treated?
You know, Madhu, the very act of trying to unlayer sort of the insurgency of Manipur brings to fact the many similarities and the many disconnects that exist with Kashmir. Like Kashmir, the accession of Manipur to sort of the Indian state and the Indian Union has been a problematic one. The Armed Forces Special Powers Act exists in both those states. That's one more similarity. But the differences are many as well. You know, how the Armed Forces Special Powers Act actually manifests on the ground in Manipur and several of the states of the Northeast is very different and very similar to how it manifests in Kashmir.
How is it different? Because from the stories that I have read and heard about Kashmir, it seems to be quite similar.
It is similar in the sense that there is a shadow of the gun that looms large in Manipur. It is similar in the sense that people go through the humiliation of checks every day, they carry their identity cards every day, they can be stopped every day. It's also similar to the extent that life, in a sense, almost shuts down at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. and people go back. It is different in a way that within the boundaries of Manipur, within the boundaries as they exist currently, you have a situation where the NSCN-IM runs its camp. Yes, it is in a peace talk with the government of India, and yes, we so-called have a framework. But within that geographical landscape, there exists pockets where men with guns run camps. The government has entered into suspension of operation agreements. What does that actually mean on the ground? That actually means that you could be staying in a village and 20 kilometers from you, there could be a Sioux camp where insurgent cadre with guns are staying in a camp with almost very little oversight. So the government believes that their arms and ammunition are in a double barrel lock. One lock or one key is with the group and one key is sort of with the administrative setup. It could be the Assam Rifles, it could be the Manipur police, etc. But that's not how it works on the ground.
Why don't you explain to the readers, because to the viewers, they will read it in your book, but for now, can you explain how the government went about the suspension of operations program by creating these camps with different insurgent groups? What was the deal that was made? And first of all, let's go with how the situation has been before that, in the sense that NSN, you have written, runs a parallel administration, a parallel government almost, a parallel taxation system, where 5% or 15%, depending on your work or your business that you're running, you have to pay to NSN. So they are rich. They are being, they have, you know, a multi-cross system going on where they have their own taxation. On the other hand, there are the other splinter, smaller groups who are extortionists.
True.
Where you can be stopped, or you can in your business, people can come in and say you have to give this much, or your business will close down, or you'll be killed.
You know, the thing is, Madhu, I mean, and I'm explaining it to you as I'm telling you. The fact is that these aren't. The thing about Manipur is these aren't instances that just happen. It's not as if you would go and you would be stopped. These are systematic things that have been put in place. So Manipur is essentially, for the case of simplification, is three groups. That there are the Nagas, the Kukis and the Meiteis. The government of India is in talks with the NSE and IM. The NSE and IM
it's been
runs
in talks
forever.
For 40 years.
Yes, and the Prime Minister's had a framework agreement when he met Muiva, I think last year in sometime in August, and came out with that framework agreement. No one knows what that framework agreement is till now, but the NSE and IM continues to run camps. I say it in my book somewhere, and this is not a statement of one Indian government official. This is a statement that's actually said in the corridors of power every day, that the government of India funds the insurgency of the NSE and IM. It is true, because the government of India is pumping the Northeast with development funds, and a fraction of those development funds are actually used for either building roads or schools or hospitals. The NSE and IM takes a cut. There are lots of conversations with so-called ministers of the NSE and IM where they say, yes, this is our money. This is our money and we take a cut. And these are well-established systems that are put in place. There is a parallel machinery. So while, you know, sitting in Delhi or in other parts of this country, we have this element of surprise. The fact is that there is no element of surprise in Manipur. This is how the system runs. And the NSE and IM's entire system is a well-managed system. It maintains complete accounts of what it takes. I say it in my book.
The government you get a receipt.
You get a receipt for it. So it's not as if the system has just been brought up in a day. The system is well entrenched. That's one part of the problem. The second part of the problem is the government signing what are suspension of operation agreements with many of the Kuki groups. Ostensibly, it's for the reason of bringing down violence, that you're actually trying to put them in a safe house and you're making them ineffective. But the fact is, these are young men with guns. They're roaming around the highways, extorting, engaging in all kinds of violence. They're also being used by other parallel groups as hit groups. So the situation is a precarious one, but you know, the fact is that there needs to be some amount of truth, some amount of saying these things, and there's a huge gap in our understanding of how Manipur operates and how we think it operates.
Mm-hmm. And you've written about that in the book. You've also written that the Indian government and the NSCN have held more than 70 rounds of peace talks at different venues from Delhi to Amsterdam. 5 prime ministers have participated in the process, aimed at ending one of India's longest running insurgencies. At times, patience has run thin and the NSCN has felt stifled by the lack of progress in what it calls an unfaithful government of India. Is there a stake in keeping the insurgencies going? Why is there no resolution?
I mean, the book is actually coming at a time in 2015 when there was a whole lot of movement. Many people in Manipur, in Nagaland, actually looked at that particular day when the Prime Minister walked in with Mr. Muiva with a lot of hope and a lot of expectation. Manipur looked at it with a lot of despair, because any agreement that you actually do with the NSE and IM affects the Naga areas in Manipur. It sort of, it at least threatens their boundaries, because the NSE and IM demand often has been that you take the Naga areas of Manipur and some of the other states and combine it with Nagaland and give us a state. You're asking me whether there is there is an investment in keeping this insurgency alive. I think one of the strategies of the government of India has been, and many home secretaries, former home secretaries have alluded to it, that you just want to tire them out. You want the leadership to get old. And some would say, hey, it's worked. See, one of their leaders is really old. He could not even come. Chisisu couldn't even come when the agreement was signed, when the Prime Minister walked in. So yes, in some ways, maybe the government of India's strategy is that the only solution is that you tire these leaders out, you have no ostensible second rung, and it could and would perhaps slowly die down.
You're talking about them, the government thinking that they will tire them out, and you've written that an army major over there told you that the extortion discredits them, that is the insurgent groups. Plus the ceasefire, the lethargy will tire them out. Soon they'll get used to the posh 5-star camps where violence is tacit and far away. Ironically, you've written the NSC and IM feels the same way about the security forces, that they too will get tired. And I want to also dovetail that question with what you've written about what Rajkumar Meghana has said to you, is that he went on to describe the characteristic bluntness where the enemy, the Indian army, was going wrong, unable to crush the insurgency with all its might. He said that we know the Indian army, how the officers behave, what's their mentality and attitude, their mental makeup. Generally, they have a racist attitude when they are here. That is one weakness they have. Their racist attitude alienates them from the people they're supposed to be protecting, officially I mean. They don't have a cause to fight here. They have their family back home. They have come here on duty. For our boys, for ourselves, we have a cause to fight for. If we don't fight, we don't exist. It's a question of do or die. Even if we die, we fight and die. That's the difference from the battlefield. So who's going to tire out?
Madhu, I have to say, thank you for reading this in as much detail as you have. Because often the questions that come to me are and I think they come across, they often say, okay, so like, are you for AFSPA or anti-AFSPA? What does the book tell you? So, I mean, I have to say thank you for sort of skimming the pages in great detail and finding the connections.
Not skimming, analyzing.
For analyzing the... Meghana gave that interview to another journalist, V.K. Shashi Kumar, which is mentioned in the book. You're right about, the funny thing is that a lot of people in Manipur actually analyze it as a situation where the army also to them seems like a group. So there is this absolute salad of groups, I mean, there are so many groups, and they look at the army as well as part of that group. The fact is that there are many similarities between how the army operates and the insurgent groups operate as well. And if Meghana accuses the army men of sort of being racist, the army and the insurgent groups live in very similar situations. The army lives in these sort of oasis of order and discipline. There's spiffy discipline in these messes. The boys will get water for the army officers to wash their hands after a meal. And exactly the same situation happens even in an insurgent camp in the NSE and IM.
Amazing.
So, both sides are aware of the reality. The Indian army continues to operate there, and one of its big tasks is to sort of keep these things under control. I remember Mr. G.K. Pillai said it once that, as long as violence is under control, everyone feels it's okay. If it's small and sputtering here and there, it's okay for everyone.
You've written about, in one situation in 1989, when there was a hearing going on in court, and the army had their own tables and chairs brought in because they found the existing chairs uncomfortable. Now that kind of arrogance, everything that you've written makes us into really a colonial power. It is very embarrassing and frightening. treating this area and the people as if they have to be subjugated. What kind of briefing is the army given when they are sent over there? What is their brief? Is it to suppress and control, or is it to also win hearts and minds? Is there any brief in which there is a strategy for the whole area? Because if I look at the incidents, such as the Justice Hegde Commission,
Yes.
where they examined 6 cases and they said they were all 3 were fake encounters,
Yes.
and the details of those encounters are just spine-chilling, and it's very difficult to swallow that this is being done in our own country to our own countrymen. A 12-year-old boy being riddled with 65 rounds of AK-47s. Another one, Azad Khan, Mohammad Azad Khan, also riddled with 40 bullets. Young boys with doing nothing, just pulled out from the house and shot at, and no reason given. And then you can understand why they would want the ASFPA removed, because this kind of high-handedness is rather extreme. What happened after the Justice Hegde Commission declared that these were fake encounters?
I just want to answer your question in 2 parts. The incident that you talk about is actually the Assam Rifles, which brought their tables and chairs into the court. It was in the late 80s. It would be untrue for me to say that the same situation can happen or does happen in Manipur at this point in time. There was a sense of arrogance, there was a sense of power, there was a sense of impunity which both the Assam Rifles and security personnel brought with them, and that the AFSPA gave them. Since then, much has changed. Much has changed in Manipur. And I think it's important to realize that it's not about repealing AFSPA or keeping AFSPA. One of the important things is that the AFSPA has almost plowed that land with impunity, which means that tomorrow when I go out on the street, my oppressor can be my neighbor. It can be a Manipur police commando. And you mentioned the Justice Hegde Commission. We must remember all the encounters that the Justice Hegde Commission looked at were declared fake encounters. And yet, there's been not a squeak, in a sense, from the government. In fact, when the Attorney General, the case has come up in the Supreme Court, and I think there was a recent hearing, the government has said, this is all, the Attorney General has almost said that this is collateral damage that we need to live with. For Manipur, when the Justice Hegde Commission, when the 3-member commission actually went to Manipur, it was huge. Madhu, it was the first time that they believed that the Supreme Court of India had sent a commission. It was huge in a sense that there was at least a shot at justice. If the government of India, or if human rights commissions or all the other bodies that exist within the Indian state had looked at just justice, or had looked at the fact that these things have happened, or would have acknowledged Manipur's position in history and what it was reduced to, or I think there's a complete denial of memory, there's a complete denial of justice, and I think that's what makes Manipur angry. Nothing happened. You're asking me what happened after the Justice Hegde Commission? Well, nothing happened. The case is going on in the Supreme Court, and we must remember the Supreme Court just picked out randomly 6 cases and say, this is the commission, and they will go and find out what happened. If memory serves me correctly, it's a dossier of 1,300 and something cases. Just randomly 6 have been picked up.
So you mentioned that they thought that finally the Supreme Court has come to Manipur, and they were expecting justice, but then nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
It's a very despairing place to live in, because if you look at what you've described, where there are no medical supplies, people with insulin, with diabetic issues.
During blockades.
Yeah, during blockades. There was the Indian Oil Oil Corporation, they had to close down.
Yes.
There was the United Bank of India, life insurance company. Everybody seems to be in trouble all the time, in just basic supplies, standing in lines for petrol, getting 5
odd liters,
Yeah, at a time.
Yes.
Rationing yourself on where you're going to go. It's And at any time, any young kid can be picked up, and you don't know what's going to happen. It seems that this is happening in our country. The media is not covering it in detail like you have in this book. It is something that is so appalling that when one reads it, you wonder that how we can call ourselves a democracy. It's a very despairing situation, I must say, your book. And when I read about the story of Manorama,
Yes.
there was not the kind of coverage that the December 16th rape.
God, yes.
It was only in that area when the women protested,
Yes.
and that also because of the manner in which they did
Yes.
it. If they'd just gone and kept their clothes on,
Yes.
and
Then it would be just another protest that
it would
happens in
just be
Manipur all the
nothing.
time.
So they call the attention to themselves in a complete state of despair that a woman can strip naked because they are so desperate to get people to listen to them.
Yes.
And this is a daily occurrence. And the description you've written of what Manorama went through is as bad as what Nirbhaya Jyoti Singh
Yes.
went through.
Yes.
And none of us reacted.
Yes. One of the big problems, that the media felt while covering it, and I wasn't covering it as aggressively, but I spoke to many journalists who covered it. Was this discourse that Manorama was a member of an insurgent outfit, was a member of the PLA? I think to Manipur, that was not the point. I think Manipur was willing to live with the fact that if she was a member of the insurgent outfit, she would go through a process of justice, she would be arrested, she would be put behind bars, she would serve a sentence, she would be kept behind bars for the rest of her life. I think that wasn't the point anyone in Manipur was disputing. What happened to Manorama, the manner in which she was killed, and just the complete subversion of justice that followed. Madhu, the media now, and I don't want to make this about the media, but there is a cult of simplification. We love simple stories. The facts should be strung in a thread. That's not how facts are. That's not how life is.
Actually, your book you've done reporting here. There's very little reporting going on, either in print or on television. Most of it is debate and columns.
Yes.
So even young people who, like somebody my age, spends a lifetime doing reportage and then reaches a stage at the fag end of my life that now I can do columns.
Yes.
But there are young people who just don't report.
Yes.
And they'll read about the Northeast here, there and everywhere and form an opinion without reporting. And I think the lack of reporting is really what is damaging our psyche, because we don't get information.
You're bang on. You're completely bang on. And I've not spent many years, but I've spent about 17 odd years in this profession, and it troubles me a lot. It troubles me a lot that we can live as journalists with the fact that large parts of India don't exist for us. We have, we've almost made it a habit. I don't want to say these things, but this is how I strongly feel about it. I think today's journalists have sort of a mind full of cliches, and we have self-fabricated phrases that we keep going on and on and on about. There's a whole lot of parachute journalism. Yes, journalism is expensive, creating content is expensive, but I think that's what we're here for. There is a complete lack of on-ground reportage. I don't think we go beyond events at all. It's very troubling for me.
Now, it was the incident in Malom that got Sharmila
To
around,
start the fast, yes.
where she impulsively decided
Yes.
that she was going to fast for the removal or the repeal of the Armed
Forces
Special Act. It was impulsive at that time, but her colleague Bablu Loitingbam suggested to her that she should ask for something more realistic, such as an inquiry into the Manorama incident or debate on the AFSPA.
Yes.
It's an established strategy with activists usually that you start with achievable goals.
That's true.
Smaller achievable goals. Do you think it was a wrong strategy on Sharmila's part, or was it just not strategy? It was an impulsive move that has now just got her stuck.
I don't think Sharmila took on this fast thinking about a strategy. I don't think Sharmila had a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan or even a 2-day plan. In some part of the book, I say that Sharmila was waiting for something to happen. She was waiting that, and I think that perhaps the expectation on her part was, at least someone will come, at least someone will talk, at least someone will say something. But I think the problem at that point in time was that no one expected her to last beyond a couple of days. When she continued to last beyond a couple of days, we also must remember that at that point in time, Sharmila wasn't like an active member of any human rights group. Yes, she had participated, but that was almost like a volunteer of sorts. She had no active participation. There was no, no support around her. There were no human rights groups that were strategizing or mobilizing people. So yes, it was a impulsive decision. And yes, I mean, 16 years down the line, you clearly have to say it was wrong strategy because almost close to nothing has been achieved.
You've written convictions of a whole lifetime are sometimes transformed under the influence of one act, by one night of sleeplessness, one dead body, one pilgrimage, and the most momentous decisions are taken in an instant. For many years there would be whispers, even gossip, that Sharmila had lost someone she loved at the hands of Assam rifles, that a very personal secret pain was behind her decision. The thing is that right through your book, when you write about Sharmila, she doesn't seem to be like a person who has even the conviction anymore. It's almost like she's on a railroad that stuck over there, where she has rather simply said, remove this. And even a judge tells her that this requires process, which I cannot do.
True, in Delhi, yes.
And in my case, I'm only going to handle law, the law of it, which is that you're in here for trying to commit suicide. She denies I'm trying to commit suicide. So he says, oh, he agrees she's not trying to commit suicide. So she goes back into jail hospital for another year, after which she's released for one day and the whole fast starts again.
That's right, yes.
Has she discussed with anyone or with you what is her out now?
Her out is simply a decision on AFSPA. I think now, 16 years later, there can be no out unless there is something substantial. There was a lot of time for out in between, right, since she started to now, to 2000 to 2016. There was a lot of out at that point in time. I mean, in 2004, after Manorama, the AFSPA was lifted from municipal localities within Imphal. That was the time for out. The fact is that now it's a very, very, very comfortable status quo for everyone.
Not for Sharmila.
Not for Sharmila. Not for Sharmila, who has over the years, Madhu, not been on a railroad. She has gone down very deep to try and understand what she is doing. Yes, it was an impulsive decision when it started. Yes, she possibly didn't think, I mean, AFSPA at that point in time was, was sort of this thing hanging, and she believed that only a repeal of AFSPA would mean everything sort of suddenly turns on the ground. But the truth is, I mean, and I have to say this as a journalist, the truth is that even if AFSPA was removed today, not everything would sort itself out in Manipur.
No, of course not.
AFSPA, like the insurgency in Manipur, is almost like an industry. You know, what are the insurgent outfits going to protest against if the AFSPA is taken away? So it is in a lot of people's interest that the AFSPA remains for reasons other than what it was supposedly brought in for. For Sharmila, what is an out now? I think Sharmila is not naive enough to think that the AFSPA is going to be repealed today, tomorrow, etc. I think the biggest fault of people who are supporting Sharmila is that you've kept this agitation solely with Sharmila. I mean, there are no other icons, so to speak. And look what is talked about Sharmila now. I mean, yes, people talk about AFSPA, but now people are more interested in her love affair, in her partner, and
so she fell, for the viewers, she fell in love with a man called Desmond.
That's right. Yes.
Of Goan origin, who lives in England.
Yes.
Through letters.
Yes.
And
he has continued to meet her. I mean, he has come down to Manipur many times. He comes when she's produced before court, he tries to meet her, he sends her letters, he sends her gifts, he's come to Delhi, he meets her, he's been thrashed by the Abbars there when he
Now
tries
that's
to
the thing, that she's been made into an icon where people do not want her to have a normal life.
Yes.
Women who supported her originally are very upset about the fact that she's fallen in love and she wants to have a relationship. And they're basically telling her, you can't.
Not all, but a substantial chunk of the women who've supported her now believe that Desmond is sort of like an Indian agent who's been sent to try and subvert her fast, to try and get her off the path. Madhu, I think it's also in a lot of people's interest that Sharmila continues to be on a fast.
How's that?
Because you have this ready-made icon who's there, who's keeping the anti-AFSPA agitation alive, even as people are going about their daily life or are reconciling to what is the situation
But it's not an agitation anymore. It's like a very quite simmering thing which has gone into the background almost.
Yes.
Because if you're fasting, it has to be to a level where there is a fear that the person may die. Like what happened with Anna Hazare, what happened with Mahatma Gandhi many times. And this is a situation where I don't think she even, from my reading of your book, I don't think she anticipated the force feeding.
She had to be convinced of the force feeding. She didn't know that the force feeding could have been a way to keep her alive, and she certainly didn't anticipate that it would go on for 16 years, and that it would mean that no one even comes to talk to you, or no one even actually tells you to give up the fast. I mean, look at the number of people who turned up to try and convince Anna Hazare to give up the fast. I think after the initial couple of years, people have sort of left her to her own device.
Because she's not going to die.
Because she's not going to die. And the fact is that everyone in Manipur is aware of what it would lead to if something were to happen to her. They're very much aware of that. But you've now got yourself in what is a perfect catch-22 situation. Because the force feeding is going to keep her alive, you're not going to talk, you're not going to engage. You've not done that for 16 years.
So she's been neutralized, really.
Yes. And I think never before, or I failed to see of an incident in the past where someone's political protest has been neutralized so effectively. That someone's been silenced so effectively by actually doing nothing.
And she's trapped in that protest.
Yes.
Where at this point, from your book, it seems like she's exhausted and tired and wants to get on with her life.
She does she wants to get on with her life. She speaks about leading a life, and having children or sort of tasting food. She speaks about it all the time. So she's not someone who's given up on life. She's someone who wants to lead a life. Yeah. And she has a very robust lust for life. She wants to be alive. She's interested in things. She's interested in books. She likes to watch a movie. She wants to see what's happening outside. She likes activity. She wants to do it. This is not someone who's sort of given away every aspect of her life and believes that this is the cause for her. Yes, this is the cause for her. It's very important. But she does want to move on.
Yes. It's really the worst Kafkaesque situation that you could imagine, to have someone neutralize a protest in a way that she can't stop protesting, she can't achieve what she's asked for.
Yes.
It's just the most bizarre sort of thing. I don't know what would have happened if Mahatma Gandhi had been force-fed. Going back to a little bit about the government and NSN. How does the central government allow the level of corruption that is happening in this area? For example, the government had given out tenders for 119 kilometers to be paved.
Yes, on that
and tenders were given. But because of all the hafta that had to be given to the insurgent groups, they were left with no money to actually build the road. So the roads were not built. And this is like a constant thing where money that is sent is just dissipated away. The people don't benefit. The only people that benefit are the ones that are corrupt. So why is the central government allowing this?
So the central government is, for all practical purposes, in a ceasefire with the NSC and IM. The Manipur
is in ceasefire
with the NSC and IM. It is, the Prime Minister came out with Mr. Muivai in August of last year and said we have a framework agreement. No one knows what that solution to the Naga problem is. So let's, for the time being, think that they continue to be in the same mode that they were before the PM came with Mr. Muivai outside. So they are in a ceasefire.
But would you agree that unlike Kashmir, in the northeast, the issue over here is that there is so much of infighting and any number of insurgency groups,
yes,
all fighting with each other also.
Yes.
The Nagas, the KK, all the separate ones, which brings you to the obvious conclusion of divide and rule,
Yeah.
which gives India an excuse, the central government rather, not India, the central government an excuse to keep the armed forces there, to function in a way that like a colonial power, but making sure that there is no resolution.
Yeah, so the talks continue to go on. You keep sending funds there. You continue to maintain a ceasefire with the NSC and IM. And I mean, I'm not trying to say that it's not an important ceasefire. It is a very important ceasefire because the levels of violence that were there in the 80s was something completely different. So obviously, not much of it happens. But the fact is that the Manipur government wants its own territorial integrity to be completely maintained. The Manipur government, if you were to go and ask the Manipur government, is there an NSC and IM camp in Manipur? They say no. There is only a taken note of camp. The ceasefire does not apply to the state of Manipur.
So actually the state government is in disagreement with the central government if they make a ceasefire or the suspension of operations.
I think mainly the ceasefire, because the SU is a tripartite. So it's
all right. So
all the three players are there.
It's beyond ironic that the central government and the army works out a ceasefire with the insurgent groups. The state government is not supporting the ceasefire. On the other hand, the army has accused the state government, the chief minister, of funding certain insurgency group. What could be messier than this?
And it's been messy for a really long time.
Do you think that when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, did he accomplish anything in the area? Because he went over there, and the Assam Rifles Lieutenant General Bhupinder Singh handed over the keys of the Kangla fort.
Yes.
Just explain to our viewers what was the significance of handing over the keys of the Kangla fort, and did Manmohan accomplish anything?
It was a very important day for Manipur. The Kangla is, Manipur's soul rests in Kangla in some way. Kangla is a place of worship. People go there, sit at Kangla, have a good time. But it's a place that has a great amount of serenity, it has a great amount of significance. After Manipur's accession to India, it's not as if the Kangla changed hands. The Kangla went in from the colonial forces to the armed forces. It went into the Assam Rifles, and I think before that there was one more regiment. So the Kangla in a sense became the seat of the Assam Rifles. And there was often a joke in Manipur that if Assam Rifles picked up someone and took them to Kangla, you don't know what happens to Kangla. After the Manorama incident and the protests that followed, the Prime Minister went down to Manipur.
Maybe you should speak a little bit about the Manorama incident, because the way her body was found, slashed, thighs slashed, clothes torn, and then the private parts after the rape riddled with bullets,
Yes.
so that there was no evidence.
Yes.
I mean, what could be worse than that?
You know, Manorama is a huge blot on the record of the Assam Rifles. And if you were to ask anyone from the Assam Rifles, they behave with, I don't think apathy is the word. They are blasé about it. They're completely blasé about it. Since 2004 to now, all that you've offered Manorama's family is compensation. You've offered them 10 lakh rupees. And that's what Manorama's mother told me once the judgment came in from the Supreme Court. That after all these years, you're still giving money. The fact is, I mean, as I said before in the interview, Manorama could have been a member of the insurgent group. Manipur was willing to accept it. Manipur was willing to accept. I mean, after all, you have Megan in jail, in NIA custody. So I'm sure they would have accepted the fact that Manorama is probably a member of the PLA and needs to be in jail. The brutality that was meted out to Manorama, her body was found very close from her home. It was riddled with gunshots. As you said, most of the gunshots were on her private parts, and everyone who went to see Manorama's body at the morgue did believe that she was shot after she was raped, and the bullets were to hide signs of rape. Look at what has followed since. I mean, there were huge protests. The Imas came out and protested. They disrobed themselves. For Manipuri society, you know, women are at the forefront of every protest. Women do everything. They cook, they clean, they take care of their in-laws, they take care of their children, they take care of their families, then they go to the market, then they
run shops,
they run shops, they earn money, then they come back.
And
they
as
feed
one
their
girl
children.
said, they stay thin after having children. Who wouldn't want to marry us?
Yeah, and then you want them to go out and protest also. And they do that. They go out and protest. They'll come out at night and carry torches. And they will sit on silent protests. So, Manipur at that point in time in 2004 did everything they could possibly think of. And what was the result? The result was when the government set up an inquiry, people didn't even come up. I mean, the commission of inquiry that was set up had to go through great lengths to get the officers to come on record. So, I think the fact is that it took so long. Justice was so tedious. It was so difficult. And it went through such amount of legal processes where you even challenged the fact that the Manipur government could act against the armed forces when they acted in violation against its own citizens. The AFSPA does not allow it.
And you write about this young boy who got a bravery award and came to Delhi to receive it.
Yes.
And then he was later shot just for standing around on a street after a bomb blast, and the forces went berserk and started shooting randomly. And the saddest part of the story is when you say that the mother continues to get these letters from the central government about the welfare, asking about the welfare of this boy, actually not keeping in touch in reality, and just making the semblance of, we've sent this letter to check how he is. And if they really were, they would know that he was killed. And so you've got a huge, very much like Kashmir, you've got a huge population of people who've lost, people have disappeared, they've been killed, women have been tortured and raped. And also you see the racism that when people from the Northeast come to places like Delhi, and the racism comes out then. What do you think should be done to bring this consciousness and awareness that this, if you wanted to be a part of India, if you wanted to stay a part of India and not be taken over by the various countries on the border, which are pushing at it and have been threatening for many years, what do you think, what would you suggest needs to be done to, one, if you were given the choice of giving a program of what needs to be done to resolve that such atrocities are never committed again, what should be done to bring peace to the area? I mean, I'm giving you the whole this thing. What can be done to resolve the violent situations? I mean, you've got these camps which are, everything is at status quo.
Yes. You know, I'm a journalist and I'm continuing to remain one. I think there are big gaps of understanding. I think if we can try and understand the region a little more. I think Sanjay Hazarika made a good point at the launch when he said that lots of people from Manipur and other parts of the Northeast do want to engage, and they are making this journey to Delhi, to either in search of livelihood or in search of an education. They are making that journey. It is important for us to try and understand. I think one big step is that you need to get in history of the Northeast into our syllabus. We need to at least know what happened. We know so much about how the Kashmir problem started, how the accession was.
I have to admit that I was really appalled at my own ignorance on the details of everything that happened. The historical details as well as the recent developments. You only read it, as you know, in snatches when an incident takes place.
Absolutely.
But this kind of cohesive sort of putting it together, our kids need to know this.
So I think that could be one big step. And I think another step could be, getting out of our city mindset. That if you humiliate someone from the Northeast, you're humiliating someone from India. If you're going to, there are these. I refer to them in the book as microaggressions, and we are okay with it. We're okay with it. In fact, someone says, "Oh, we're being too sensitive about some of these things." What's the big deal? You're calling them A, B, C. What's the big deal? I think, yes, we need to be brave about it, but we need to be sensitive. We need to learn more. We need to try and understand parts of India that go beyond Gurgaon and Noida.
I'd ask you to end the interview by reading this passage, which you've quoted from Frederick Carl. Here you go.
Thank you. So Frederick R. Carl, the author of Franz Kafka's biography, Representative Man, said in an interview, "What's Kafkaesque is when you enter a surreal world in which all your control patterns, all your plans, the whole way in which you've configured your own behavior begins to fall to pieces. When you find yourself against a force that does not lend itself to the way you perceive the world. You don't give up, you don't lie down and die. What you do is struggle against this with all of your equipment, with whatever you have. But of course, you don't stand a chance." That's Kafkaesque.
Thank you, Anubha. I congratulate you on your book.
Thank you.
It's very raw, it's violent. It exposes a lot of realities which are difficult to deal with. It's also lyrical in the sense that you talk about Sharmila looking at birds, the sky, the leaves. Brings a lot of what we miss as journalists. And what is my biggest regret is that journalists who have written books, and I don't mean the ones written about themselves and their experiences, which are fine and great and fun. I mean the ones that require reportage like this. We don't have Pulitzer Prizes. We don't have anything that journalists who work so hard on a book like this, like Aviruk Sen's book, hugely detailed, a huge amount of work. And I've seen journalists who've taken a subject and worked hard on it, don't get what they deserve. Really, it is one of the saddest things in our country that this books that are written off with in a couple of months, dashed off with just personal experiences, but the ones that require hard work and research and solid reporting never get what they do. But I hope that your book does, and you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me, and as I said, looking at this book in such great detail. It means a lot.
Thank you, Anubha.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that, click up here to support us and down here to subscribe. Be sure to check out our older episodes and the other stuff we do, like Can You Take It, I Agree, panel discussions, comics and animations, and much, much more.